Well, hello, everyone. I'm Paula Bartholomew, and just delighted that you've tuned in for Hawthorn University's All About Alumni series. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing our graduate, Marjie Andrejciw, and you will have the opportunity to ask her questions directly after she gives her presentation. So hello, Marjie. Welcome back.
Thank you, Paula. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, I'm really excited to be here together, and it's a pleasure to introduce you and your presentation evolving with my practice. So I'm going to start right off with that. Marjie has her master's degree in holistic nutrition from Hawthorn University. She's certified as a holistic nutritional counselor and has been in practice for over 9 years. And she has over 10 years of experience as a medical technologist in the clinical laboratory. And she's well versed in interpreting and understanding the significance of laboratory testing. She's certified in 2 levels of methylation and clinical nutrigenomics through Seeking Health Education on Methylation and clinical nutrigenomics through Seeking Health Educational Institute. And Marjie is honorably discharged veteran of the United States Air Force. Thank you for your service, Marjie, there too. And Marjie, having suffered from an autoimmune disease and genetic methylation imbalances, truly understands how challenging recovery your health can be. Not only is she able to be sympathetic, but she's also realistic because of having personally walked the pathway of recovering her own health. So welcome to Hawthorn and to All About Alumni, Marjie.
Thank you, Paula. I have so much to share, and this always seems to be what happens with me, is I have so much more information, and hopefully we're going to get it all in a nice, easy to follow mode.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to have you here and that you have a lot to offer. It's very inspiring and encouraging to our students in school and our graduates that are listening. So let's get started. I'm wondering about, choosing Hawthorn. Let's start there. Why did you choose Hawthorn? How did you come to finding us and selecting us out of any of the others?
That is a great question, Paula, and I'm going to start with why I even decided to go to school. And so that was a turning point in my life. This was in 2002, and I was working as in the clinical lab as a medical technologist. And for people who don't know what that means, I was the one running the labs, the CBCs, the blood bank, the chemistries. And I was totally frustrated with traditional medicine, even though I had been extensively trained in it. I was suffering with a chronic illness, and I had been to my doctor several times to no avail. I mean, to the point where they had actually said, it's probably due to Prozac or needing an antidepressant. And I was so very put out with that. Because of my background, I knew based on my symptoms, it was something with my thyroid. And I kept going back to my doctor, and she would only test my thyroid stimulating hormone, right, the TSH, and it would be within reference range, but not necessarily an optimal range, looking back, and wouldn't test anything else. And I was just so frustrated. And I hear the same story from so many of my clients. I hear this over and over again. And so after I did additional research, I encouraged her to also test my antibodies, and lo and behold, I had Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease to my thyroid, and that's hypothyroidism, low thyroid function. And so once that happened, she sent me to an endocrinologist, and he promptly put me on Synthroid. He put me on a very high dose, and he put me into a thyroid storm. And so instead of feeling better, I felt horrendously worse. And I had a lot of agitation. I had a lot of joint pain. I felt like I was literally hanging on by my fingernails, and I wasn't able to sleep. And the list just kept getting worse and worse. So I went back to my doctor, and I said, okay, this didn't work out real well. And she says, I have a different endocrinologist to send you to. And that endocrinologist happened to be trained as a medical technologist before earning her doctorate degree in endocrinology. So I was very respectful of that. And she said to me, let's put you on Armour Thyroid, which is a glandular, and let's get you out of the thyroid storm. Let's adjust your medication. And so I was already so happy to hear that. And then she said something extremely profound to me. She said, I'm traditionally trained and I can adjust your medication. She says, but I do not know why your immune system is out of balance. And if you can work with a practitioner who can help you figure that out, that's when you will recover. And there's not much else that we can do in traditional medicine. And so that put me on a path of looking. And that's what I did. I went to a preventative medicine doctor, and he was able to identify what was going on as far as the underlying health concerns. I had severe food intolerances, allergies, gluten, dairy, corn, with corn being my worst sensitivity, he discovered. I had horrendous gut dysbiosis. Leaky gut, I'm sure, was in there too. I had heavy metals. I had other toxic burden going on. I had excessive inflammation, and I had systemic infections to include, but not only, a systemic yeast overgrowth that was not candida. It was something else. And he said to me that I was on a pathway to major organ failure, probably within the next 6 months, and it was probably be my liver. He said I had a foot in the grave. And that all took place probably 2003 by the time I got to this point. And while he did a really good job of figuring out what the underlying issues were, he did not do such a good job at putting together the pieces. And so I started talking to different people, and I decided I wanted to go back to school. And that's when I was talking with a practitioner who was going to school for Ayurvedic medicine, and he suggested, hey, check Hawthorn out. He says they're relatively new, so this would have been in 2005. He says they're relatively new. They are offering a master's degree, which was very important to me. I already had the bachelor's. I already had my certification as a medical technologist. I would not be happy with just a certification. I wanted a master's degree. I really liked Hawthorn's philosophies. And most important, it was offered long distance, also very important, but most important, Paula, was my interview with you. So keeping in mind, I was still having lots of anxiety. I was still, my gut hurt. I wasn't sleeping well. I was having a hard time focusing. And yet, in that interview with you, you made me feel like welcomed, and you inspired me, and you were like, I think you've come to the right place. And I just felt so good after that interview with you. I quit looking. I knew I was coming to Hawthorn, and I started in December of 2005. And I loved the whole time I was at Hawthorn. It took me about 2.5 years to get through the Hawthorn program and the master's program. And Paula, I don't know if you remember, but I think I was number 17 with the MSHN master's degree from Hawthorn, or something like that, less than 20. So I was one of the first students. And all of the support that I received, the one-on-one mentoring. Emily Bender was my mentor, and we had some great conversations. So that's why I decided to go to Hawthorn. And while I was a student, and even afterwards, I had a lot of those aha moments. It was more than just the studies that we would do when we were doing the modules. I attended an NANP conference, and at this time, NANP was relatively new, and we were meeting up in Sonoma County. And at this particular conference I'm thinking of, Dr. David Brady with Designs for Health, he was presenting, and he was talking about thyroid. And because of my having the Hashimoto's, I was like, ooh, I couldn't write notes fast enough.
Right.
And he said something so profound. He says, if your client is taking Armour Thyroid, you should switch them to the Westroid or the Nature-Throid, because Armour has cornstarch in it along with some other chemicals. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have a corn intolerance, and they have me on Armour. So as soon as I got home from that, we switched that over. And amazingly, I felt so much better. And you know, I could give so many more of those aha moments. There were so many of them. But what I want to encourage either students or people who have recently graduated is to get out to these conferences, because not only are you in a community with other like-minded people, but you can have those profound aha moments like I had. I also attended the Weston A. Price Foundation conferences, and the food, of course, is amazing. Well, and it is at the NAMP conference too, for that matter. But again, learning some of the things I learned, listening, just like today's webinar, listening to the Hawthorn University webinars. Sometimes something would get said in just a little different perspective or with a little bit more information, and it was really helpful. It was really helpful in learning and becoming the practitioner I am today. My mentor discussions with Emily after the end of each module and talking through that, chewing that information over, was very helpful.
Really, I remember that interview with you, Marjie, and at the end of that conversation, I thought Hawthorn would be very fortunate if you were a student here. So I think it worked out. It was a good thing both ways for both of us, and I'm glad for that. So I'd appreciate now if you could talk a little bit about how you began your practice, and I think it would be helpful if you talk about the scope of your practice too, based on your education and your background.
Okay. Well, I actually started my practice while I was a student. So after, and this might be something for people who are currently students, maybe they don't realize this. After we finish the foundational exam, we can set up our practice. And I did this with the DBA. I created Circle of Life Nutrition, and a DBA is a doing business as. That's at the county level. I don't know, it's like 10 or 15 bucks a year. And I started my practice. So if you're earning even the smallest amount of income, according to my CPA, on our 1040, it's done under a Schedule C, and I know that's a little technical, but you are able to claim expenses. So even if you're only making, say, $100, you can claim expenses. So think of your books or conferences, supplements that you might be trying out on yourself or with practice clients. We can claim those, and that can be a really good way to start your practice. It starts to get your name recognition out there also. I taught community levels classes. I mean, consider all of the information that we get from those foundational modules. You know, we talk about good proteins and good fatty acids and which they should be, and eating a whole foods diet, and, you know, no longer eating out of our plastic dishes, but switching over to glass. You know, there's so much information. And when we start sharing that in those community level classes, you know, we're practicing our information. I also wrote a few articles for a local health magazine. Now, I didn't get paid for them, but I didn't pay for those either. Those articles were reviewed, and they went and they checked my references, and, you know, there was a few of them I had to go back and rewrite a little bit before they would publish them, and they were published. Also, getting my name out there and having that Circle of Life Nutrition, and I would identify that I was a student at Hawthorn, started to get my name recognized in my community. And I started walking my talk, right? And we start doing that in those foundational classes. You know, people would see me with a glass water bottle instead of plastic, and they might look at it funny, which opened the door for me to explain why. You know, they see what I would eat for lunch at the hospital. I actually had one person say to me, "Oh gosh, Marjie's here. If I'd have known she was here, I would have chose something healthier to eat out of the line." You know? And I didn't even say anything, and I would be very intentional not to scrutinize people's lunches, but just my presence would still encourage good eating habits. I would talk to anybody who would listen, and I had to learn in the beginning, you know, it's really easy to choose somebody's ear off on something that you're extremely passionate about. But if somebody is asking a question and they want that answer, to engage in that conversation. And I still do this. You know, when we are practicing the information that we know, we're making ourselves a better practitioner to be able to explain things to people, especially our clients. And then I would set up a vendor table at a Healthy Traditions Network event. And Healthy Traditions Network is in the Southfield, Michigan area. And that is a chapter of Weston A. Price. And I set up vendor tables for a few years in a row. This particular picture wasn't taken until 2010, but you get the idea. You see my big old logo right in my website. At this point, I had the pantry, which you're going to talk about in a minute. At this particular conference, they gave me the opportunity. I didn't make money, but I still had the opportunity, and I taught a fermentation class on making homemade sauerkraut. And oh, look at there, we've got fermentation jars, those Pickelmeister jars, and I had salt, and I had the pounder, and I was selling those that day, and I had samples. And you know, these were a great way, again, to get your name out there, to get to talk to people, let them know what you're about, and to teach them a little bit about eating, you know, really good, wholesome foods. So
it looks really good.
my thesis was a jump start to my practice. And what inspired me for my thesis at Hawthorn was Julie Matthews. And while she is not a Hawthorn graduate, I know she's done several webinars for Hawthorn. And I mean, she is just a dynamo in our field, and very inspirational. And I listened to her at a Hawthorn webinar, and she was presenting her book, Nourishing Health Nutritional Interventions with Autism Spectrum Disorder. And once I listened to that, I was a firm believer, and this is what I ended up doing. This was my passion. I attended a Defeat Autism Now conference. Now, they don't use that acronym anymore, just to be clear. That also stands for the Dive Alert Network, and because they had it first, Defeat Autism Now no longer uses that. They use Autism Research Institute instead, so ARI, if you're looking for conferences on the with the autism. But I attended a couple of those conferences to really help me round out and understand more completely when I was doing my thesis and my background studies. And then my thesis, okay, this is a long one, clinical trial of school-aged children with autistic spectrum disorders using a holistic approach through diet, lifestyle, and supportive supplement modifications. So quite the mouthful, but it really set the stage for my practice. And if you remember, Paula, I think I was the first one with an IRB. What does that stand for? Institute Research Board, or does that sound about right? IRA.
Institutional Resource Board, Reference Board, yes.
Thank you. And that's the board to ensure that I'm not going to, hurt anybody or harm, and that I have a sound thesis or clinical trial. And the reason that I had to do this is because Defeat Autism Now gave me a grant to help cover some of the cost for the testing that I did with the children that I worked with for this clinical trial. And correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, I think I was the first one to do a clinical trial.
Yes, absolutely. And to work with, human subjects was a big piece of your work, certainly.
And, so there was a lot of work. And just for any students out there, if you're thinking, oh, this is cool, I want to do this, keep in mind, I had to convince Paula and all of the other people on that IRA that I was going to be able to, in a timely manner, complete this clinical trial with realistic findings. And I had to convince them that I could do that before they let me start. And while it was a really cool thing to be able to do, it was a lot of work. And I think it took me 7 months is about what it took me to do this. But I had some really good findings. And the interesting part is the people that participated in my clinical trial, they're still in my life. I still talk to them. The mom of one of them is a client of mine. It's great. It's all good stuff. And I get to see those kids as they've progressed, and some things they stuck with and some things they didn't, but it definitely taught them a lot to be able to move forward with what they were doing with their interventions and such. So my first client was the day after I graduated, which I graduated on June 16th of 2008. And I had no idea how prophetic this would be, but my first client was actually a cancer survivor and not a child with autism. And she said, I've been listening to you, I've been asking you questions, and I want you to help me. So, all good stuff. So here's my first office, and this was at my home, and I did this to save money, but, you know, which is a great way to start. But there's always issues with having an office at home. Sometimes it's hard to get the client to leave after that appointment. They want to stay and chat, you know, and then there's that kind of weirdness about, you know, they're using your bathroom and they're in your living room, or, you know, so while this can be great, there are some drawbacks. And I still use this office for my long distance appointments and stuff. And you know, you can see there's lots of books and all kinds of great stuff there. My first 2 years in practice, my website, circleoflifenutrition.net. You know, we set that up. I quickly realized that I was not just working with children on the spectrum, but that I was working with people with chronic illness, hence that first client. And yep, I'd have people say to me, if you can help an autistic child, I know you can help me. So I evolved very quickly in the first 2 years. My first large presentation was getting Gutsy for the Healthy Traditions Network in May of 2009. I was awarded the Going Up Carrot from NANP in May of 2010. And here's a picture. Sally Fallon and Dr. David Brownstein were the other presenters at that Getting Gutsy. And I had a great attendance for my presentation. And of course I had a vendor table and, you know, really cool stuff.
And then here's my photograph. Oh, look at that.
You know what's funny about this? I think that is Emily's head who's taking the picture up in the right corner.
You're right, it is.
Everybody was being weird to me this particular day of the conference, and I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? They were all like anticipating something, and I am like, what's going on? And then when I received the award, I just could not believe it. It was a really great moment.
It's a great moment because you were surprised.
I was totally surprised, and you guys were all so excited and happy and supportive of me. It was great.
Yeah, it was
Huge honors. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's well deserved.
Yes. Thank you.
You bet. So let's move along here. You're started up and now you're expanding your practice. So, you know, why did you feel like you needed to expand your practice?
Oh, good question. So changes in practice. I really started doing the long distance consultations using either the Skype or phone. You know, you could use FaceTime, but I don't have an iPhone. But I find that using Skype is a great, and I have a lot of clients who've never used Skype, so they're a little nervous about that in the beginning. But once we use that Skype for an appointment, it's like you're sitting right across the table from them. They love that. Yeah. And I have clients, they might only be 10, 15 minutes away, but they are so ill or, you know, with their chronic issues going on that the idea of getting in the car and coming to my office is too much for them.
It's a huge convenience, yes.
Mm-hmm. And so I really encourage people who are not using Skype or FaceTime, I encourage you to do that. With the phone, because of cell reception, I get spotty for me, and there's nothing more frustrating than not being able to hear each other. Mm-hmm. I can still, through the Skype, call somebody else's phone, and that makes for a much nicer conversation. But I find that we do miss a little bit of something in those long distance appointments when we just have the phone. There's so much we pick up when we're seeing each other. And I don't charge any extra for these consultations, but I work with people all over the world. I'm right in the process now of picking up my third client from China, which that can be challenging because of the time zone or the time difference, but also the accent thing. You know, while they speak pretty good English, sometimes I still don't understand or I talk too fast. So we have to work on that. But I've had some autistic children from China that I've worked with, and then I've had a few clients from Canada. So, but all over the country. I have a virtual dispensary set up through Elevate, and it used to be with Emerson, but they've recently switched to this Elevate. And if you don't have your account set up with that, I really recommend it. As a student, you can set up a Elevate, and this is a great way for clients to purchase supplements through you. And it's just super, super easy, and I really like it. And I have noticed an increase in sales since I went to the Elevate. When I had the Emerson, I'd have people go other places to get supplements.
Mhm.
I do lab testing through my med lab. You know, that became a big, huge thing. And through my med lab, I'm contracted with them, and I do their specialty lab test interpretations. Those are half-hour appointments. So if somebody goes to my med lab and orders, say, urine organic acids or an IgG food antibody panel or neurotransmitters, then they can set up a review with me, and I'll review those labs with them and, you know, make some recommendations. And that's kind of a nice thing to do, and it's good for my med lab too. They actually contact me at times for some, you know, what do you think about this? And, you know, with changes in labs and stuff. And it's been a really good relationship back and forth for us.
Wonderful.
I am recognized as an expert in the community. And I love that. I get lots of referrals from people in the community, even if they're not a client of mine. I get called from the local newspaper for an expert opinion on different health topics. And it's kind of cool because they actually spell my name right. And I'm like, woohoo, bonus. I'm teaching higher level classes, and then these webinars I've done for Hawthorn. I am so stretched with my time and seeing clients and doing what I do with the pantry, which I know we haven't talked about yet, that I just don't have a lot of time to do classes. It's got some prep to it. So here's the virtual dispensary from the Wellevate, and notice my name. It's wellevate.me/Marjie space Andrejciw. This is my portal. And when you click on that, you'll see my face come up in the, I think it's the right corner. But after this gets posted, you know, when you archive it, they should be able to click on that. That is a hyperlink if they wanted to just check it out, if anybody did. And then here's my online lab testing through my med lab, and you'll notice my logo up in the top left corner. And again, that's also a hyperlink. And you notice it's CLN, Circle of Life Nutrition.mymedlab.com. And then I expanded with Marjie's Gluten-Free Pantry, which I've touched on a few times. I opened that in May of 2010. And I did this because I had clients who were like, you have made these fantastic recommendations. Well, maybe they don't always think they're fantastic in the beginning, but these transitional recommendations. And I don't know where to buy this at. In my area here in Michigan, we're in the Midwest, it takes us a couple years to warm up to things, right? We're a little quicker out on the West Coast. And our closest Whole Foods is 38 miles.
Wow.
I would have clients with a list of things to get and drive down to the Ann Arbor to the Whole Foods and would call me and just be so upset and overwhelmed. And I'm like, I've got to do something. And so that's the whole motivation behind having the pantry. It is an expansion of my practice. Everything is completely gluten and dairy free, including our personal care products like lip balms and hairsprays and things like that. We are committed to having nutritious foods free of harmful additives. I strive to minimize the corn and the soy because of some of the issues with those foods. I offer environmentally sound personal care products and cleaning products. And we are a retail co-op through UNFI. And UNFI is the major distributor to Whole Foods. So if somebody says, hey, I can get that at Whole Foods, I'm like, well, we can order it by the case here in the store and you're going to get co-op pricing. And then they pick it up here and stuff. And that works out really well for a lot of people. And then the website for the pantry is marjiespantry.com. I also own the domain marjiesglutenfreepantry.com, but it's easier with just the Marjie's Pantry. But either way, we'll get you to our website, and we have information about the co-op on that. We have recipes that we post, of course, all gluten, dairy free, and just a lot of really good information. And I hired employees. I currently have 5 people who work for me. So this is the beginning. This is the early years. This is it today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I want to do that again, Paula, because it was such a profound difference. Here it is early, and I did not pick those red, white, and blue awnings, by the way.
No, look, it also says closed.
Yeah, I noticed that after we picked that picture. I'm like, huh. But here we are today.
Open. much more inviting.
Yes. So 7 years that we've been open.
Bravo.
So some other practice expansions. I created a second office inside of Marjie's Pantry, and I do one-on-one consultations here. And I mentioned earlier, I still use my home office for long-distance appointments, and that's where I do my paperwork and stuff when I'm putting together protocols. I find when I'm in the pantry, there's a lot of other things to distract me. I presented to be or not to be gluten-free at NAMP in 2011. That was a real big honor to be able to do that presentation. I moved the location of the pantry to a larger location in May of 2011. So our first location, which was right back through our back parking lot, it was a third of the size as our current location. So after I opened the pantry, within a year, I already needed more space. And my husband really questioned what I was doing, but he supported me. Now he sees my wisdom and he goes, I'm glad I didn't talk you out of it.
Me too. So is your community.
Yes, yes, yep. I publish a monthly newsletter, which is really a nice thing to be able to do. Here's my office, and I'm telling on myself on my other picture being a little dated. Look at how long my hair is. This was taken yesterday. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they are painted exactly the same colors. Even the curtains are the same. I wanted to have that uniform between the two offices. But I have a much larger desk in this bigger office, because a lot of times I'm working with kids and mom and dad or a brother or sister will come. And so it's nice to have the whole table just spread out. And I like being at a table. It just makes it very inviting, when people are working with us.
Yes.
So some expansions for the pantry. We participate in a lot of community events. I am right in the historic downtown district of Fenton, Michigan, which is, again, 38 miles north of Ann Arbor, if you're trying to figure out where that is in Michigan. And just recently, just the month of July, we had the Art Walk and we had the Fenton Freedom Festival, which is 2 days for the 4th of July. The parade was literally out our front door. And I'm very involved in these events. I'm on some of the boards to help with organizing some of them. I can walk into the city offices and they all know who I am, and I like it that way. I can go into a DDA meeting and they know who I am. I communicate and I have synergy with a lot of the fellow merchants in the area and with other practitioners. Like I have people that I can refer to, like an acupuncturist or a massage therapy or a chiropractor, and we do that back and forth. We have that synergy, and I just feel as a practitioner in this holistic world that it's really important that we do that. It's not about being competitive, it's about that working together, and I think that's important, and I just really want to take that chance to make that comment. I advertise with a logo on my Jeep, and in like 2 slides I'll show you a picture of that. So I literally have advertisement on the go. I hired a social media person, and in my opinion, this is a future of advertising. I find that print advertising is a waste of money. It's horrendously expensive, and I don't get the bang for my buck out of it. And this is not my area of expertise, and so I hired somebody to help me with that, and she even helped me polish this webinar. She's fantastic. I'm so blessed to have her in my life. I hired Lindsay Schwartz. She is my assistant manager, and she is a current student at Hawthorn University. I hired her in September of 2015, and she has been fantastic. I can't say nothing but great things about her. And I increased our refrigeration. I increased refrigeration ×4 back in February of 2016 to allow us to bring in a lot more product. I updated our point of sale in April of 2016, and that includes 2 cash registers now, along with the updated software to support that. And then here's our events and classes. And I just want to bring to your attention on the left, see the man in the blue? Mm-hmm. That happens to be my husband. That's where our refrigeration is. You see that wall with shelving? And that's where our old refrigeration used to be, along that wall. It's just not in the picture. And then you can see I'm teaching a community level class on the right-hand side, and I have the projector. That's our new refrigeration. And you see it takes that entire wall up.
Looking good.
Yeah. Here I was at an Expo EAST show with one of my staff, and this is a UNFI, in case you're not familiar with what this is, this Expo. This was in Baltimore, and I actually had my picture taken with Bob from Bob's Red Mill. That was kind of fun, and I got a cookbook. But there were like thousands of people at this. It was crazy, and thousands and thousands, of vendors, and it's not as big as the Anaheim. Yeah. It's not as big as Anaheim, but I'm like, don't eat much breakfast because you're going to be stuffed by the end. And you're exhausted.
Right.
It's all good.
You get your steps in for sure.
Yeah, and here's my Jeep. And for students, here's another little tip about being a practitioner. This is a business expense. Everywhere I drive, I have my logo. I lease this vehicle, which according to my CPA is the best way to do that to get the most expense out of it. You know, but that includes your gas, that includes your maintenance, that includes the insurance. And just yesterday, I always keep cards with me. And just yesterday, I was driving to pick up some tile for a project we have going on here at the pantry. And this lady stopped me. I was on the ramp to get off, and she signaled for me to roll my window down. And she's like, "Where are you? I need you." And I said, "I'm going right up over here around the corner. Follow me, and I'll give you a card." And I took that opportunity to talk to her a few minutes and gave her a couple cards. So, hey, this moving ad works.
Yes. Moving ad and the willingness to pull over and talk a little bit. Right.
I'm very, very good at talking to strangers. I know no strangers.
It's good. All right. Well, you've been sharing a lot of knowledge. Here we are expanding your knowledge and the importance of that. So let's have you take off on that thought a little bit of what you're doing now and why.
Yes, the why. This is my bold highlight. Pay attention. Never stop learning. Even though I graduated over 9 years ago, this field is growing exponentially. Things that I know within the last 4 to 5 years is so much more than what I knew when I first graduated. I just can't stress this enough. I attend conferences and webinars, and conferences can be expensive, and if they're in a different time zone than you, like for me, coming from Michigan, we're on Eastern Standard Time, going to Pacific Standard Time, that 3-hour time difference, that just wipes me out, but because you're trying to focus and be up and go to bed, and it just kind of really messes up your circadian rhythm. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is make sure that they pick conferences and webinars that are really prevalent to what their specialty is, what their niche is. Don't just go to a conference because you're like, oh, this looks like fun, but go pick and choose. And I do find that the webinars, you get more bang for your buck, and you don't have to do that travel. But sometimes it's nice to go to the conference because you've got that other like-minded people. So I guess there's pros and cons to both, but attend them is the key point there. And if you are a member of NANP, they require 10 hours of community or continuing education anyhow. So it's a great way to pick it up. Read books and periodicals. I don't know if anybody has been doing some of these summits. Dr. Jay Davidson, I mean, he has done some fantastic summits here recently. He recently did one on, it was the Lyme Summit 2, and it was the second one. And I felt that, this is just my opinion, I felt the second one was much better than the first because some of the people he brought in were just really had great information. And, I pick up through some of those types of summits and stuff, and I can't listen to all 36 of those webinars that they offer through those. I suppose I could purchase the program, but I pick and choose. But a lot of times when I pick up a book or maybe a periodical, I might have gotten that information referenced from one of those webinars, and oftentimes I'm really happy that I listened to that and got that and purchased that book to read it, because it just really helps. So just food for thought. Writing articles for the newsletter, which we do every month, and then teaching classes. I feel it really forces your research into a topic, and it's a great way to stay up on the information. When you can teach it, you learn it much more deeply than just reading the article. And become an expert in your niche or niche, depending on how you say that, or maybe we could call it your specialty. But when people look to you to be an expert in that area, I think that's really important, and they're going to value that. So here's my certification in the Seeking Health Educational Institute. This is my part 2 of this. I have 24 hours in this certification. This was hard. I had to take tests and everything to obtain this certification. But methylation, for those who are not at that point in their studies, is the beginning of phase 2 detoxification that occurs in the liver. And if your methylation, which is the beginning of those 6 conjugation pathways, isn't properly working, and I'm saying not properly working, I'm not saying that it's not working at all, because if it wasn't working at all, you wouldn't be sitting here listening to this webinar. But that when it gets impeded, that it affects the other 5. And so it's really an important part. And we're really coming, this is an evolving area, and we're realizing the importance of it. And so if you're not familiar with the genetic SNPs, not only with methylation, but with the other 5 conjugation pathways, I encourage you to start looking at it, because it's the up and coming thing that people are looking at. Professional listings, I'm listed on the Seeking Health Educational Institute as a practitioner for these methylation SNPs, and I currently am the only practitioner in the state of Michigan on this list. And I get a ton of references or referrals from this, just a lot. It's really quite amazing. I do have to pay for this listing, but it's paid for itself many times over. Greater than 90% of clients with a chronic illness have a methylation impedance, highlighting that word again, impedance. It could be due to genetics, but sometimes it can be due to nutritional deficiencies or other things that are going on that are causing issues with that methylation pathway. So, I already said that. And lots of referrals. Back to you, Paula.
Okay, well, it seems like you have a lot on your plate and you're really busy, but I know you, Marjie, and I know you're not just sitting idle saying, I've got enough here. You're planning forward. So what's happening and coming up?
Looking forward, my daughter is, I've hired my daughter, and we are training her currently as a manager. Yeah. I guess the bug has bit her as far as being in nutrition. She is planning, hopefully, to attend Hawthorn in the fall. She has an associate's degree, but not a bachelor's degree, so she's looking for the NC program. Mm-hmm. Once Lindsay graduates and she becomes a practitioner, she's looking to be a practitioner under my logo, Circle of Life Nutrition, as a part of my practice, and that is very exciting. We have really good ideas for updating Marjie's Pantry with online and website sales. And in addition, Lindsay and Amber are to start offering some classes and workshops and support groups, and to fill in and complement things that I just don't have enough time for. So of course I would be, supervising and talking these over with them, but we've got some really good ideas, and I'm really hoping that that's going to start in the fall. I'm constantly looking for new products, and I'm saying Amber and Lindsay are constantly looking for new products.
It's the expanded eye now.
Yes, the expanded eye. We're hoping to continue to expand our online presence with a blog, maybe some short videos, some group discussions, and some of these other really neat things. And so we've been chewing around a lot of really good ideas.
All right. Well, a lot of wisdom has been shared, and I don't know if you have any bits left in your pocket there that you can offer up here as we close out this really nice presentation.
Thank you. I have a few. So some lessons I've learned on the job. Have a specialty and become an expert. I just cannot stress that enough. We cannot be everything to everyone. And I say, don't be afraid to fire a client who's really challenging or unappreciative of your services, because I have discovered that they really just drain you. And, you don't have to be nasty, but just to be like, I'm not sure this is working out. And I've had to do that. And this is not an easy thing to do, but it's important. Have scheduled practice hours. You know, you need time off also, and I'm saying that to the community at why I do practices in holistic, in this holistic world, because I get people that, honest to goodness, call me at 10:30 on a Saturday evening.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? So I actually turn my phone off on the weekends. So if possible, separate yourself from receiving a payment. You know, you're the practitioner, and I have my employees accept payment at the end of an appointment if at all possible.
Nice.
So having a solvent practice, I recommend not discounting or doing a pro bono for your services. I feel that it dilutes your message. I've had people where I've done, we do the barter system, and I find that I'm the one that always comes up on the short end of that because I have so much to offer.
Yes.
Some practitioners successfully do offer packages. It's not something that I'm currently doing, but I've noodled this over, and I can see some wisdom in that on how you could be successful with that. You know, it gets people coming back. So I think that would be a good thing. So I wanted to mention that. In my opinion, you need to diversify our practices because there simply is not enough time to only see clients on a day-to-day basis. You know, for every hour I spend with a client, I spend another hour putting together their protocol or answering, you know, quick email messages back and forth and such. And so we have to diversify, you know, whether that be supplements or classes or other things. It gets to be exhausting also if you only see clients. And so having the diversification is important no matter what that might be for somebody. And then this is something somebody very wise once said to me: profit is not a bad word, and we shouldn't feel guilty about earning money. I have 5 staff members counting on me for a paycheck, right?
Yeah.
So here's some fun. This is my garden. And in Michigan, we have a very short growing season, so we need to do as much as we can in about a 3-month period. And then making the most out of life. For those of you that don't know, I'm a scuba diver, and which is kind of funny, tongue-in-cheek, I'm Dan squared, right? Being a Dan practitioner early on, and then being a member of the Dive Alert Network.
There you go.
And with that, I open it to questions.
All right, thank you. There are a few. Nicely done, Marjie. It's just very
Thank you.
calm presentation. I appreciate that, but packed. Let's talk a little bit about your training in the lab, your lab test training, and where you got that and how long ago. Because you've been doing it more than 10 years now, right?
Oh, definitely. So I'm no longer in the clinical lab, running labs, but what I did is I have a bachelor's degree in biological sciences from Michigan Tech University. And when I first graduated, I'm like, oh, I wanted to do research or something, but well, you need at least a master's degree to do that. And so when we had moved to Georgia after we graduated because of my husband's job, and I was struggling to find work. And when I did some research down there, I'm like, you know, I like being in the lab. And so I went to Georgia State, and I have a certification. It took me, it was 1 year of classes, and I think it was 6 or 7 months of an internship where I actually worked in the hospital, in the lab, under the supervision of other medical technologists. And once I graduated with that, I walked right into a job. And, you know, part of what I do is I have to be able to draw blood, collect specimens. Yes. And that's part of being a med tech. So you don't have to be a med tech to collect blood. You can just be a phlebotomist, but a phlebotomist can't work in the laboratory. They don't have that education. And I worked in the chemistry department, the immunology department, the blood bank. I was trained to work in hematology, even though, okay, I'm admitting that was not my favorite. Yep. And so that's a bachelor's degree plus a certification to be a med tech, if that was the question.
Yes. And next question is about Welvate. They don't ship internationally, so how do you handle that with your Chinese clients?
It's been interesting because my Chinese clients, who all happen to have children on the spectrum, they have a way in their own country to be able to order labs. It's a little different for them over there. And so far, what they've done is they can go back through I can't remember how she described it, but they had a way to be able to order their labs, and so it worked out beautifully. But they did have a way of ordering, was it Great Plains Laboratory or Genova, one of those, and so they were able to do that. So I think there is some international, some of those labs, specialty labs do international, but anytime I wanted to look for routine blood work, you know, like a CBC or anything like that, they could just go back through their healthcare provider in their country, and it was no big deal. And the interesting thing is the Chinese medicine, or in that world, their reference ranges were actually more close to our optimal ranges here in the States. And I found that really interesting.
Right. But the Welevate, that's talking about the lab that Welevate's for supplements. So how do you handle that?
I want to say we did it through Emerson, and we were able to send them over. We somehow got them in, and it's easy to send things into China. It was a little harder when she was in Japan. If she was getting supplements, the person in particular I'm thinking of, she lived half time in China and half in Japan, and anytime she was getting supplements, she would get them through China. So she must have been ordering through my Emerson account because she was having them shipped to her.
Okay. All right, we'll try to get more detail about that. But
sorry, I'm not more helpful. It just it worked out. So
I'm glad. The questions about how you got your med lab job.
Oh, I think I answered that a little bit. After I did my internship, at the hospital I did my internship at, I started like the next day. It was almost a seamless position. Yeah. That's right. And I originally worked in the immunology lab. And immunology is where we do things like HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, all the hepatitis, rubella. Yeah.
Okay. Back to your Jeep. So is the lease car painted, or it just has this logo on it, or a vinyl, or some kind of a magnet on it?
It is like a big old sticker.
Okay.
And I have a sign guy. I was going to go back to it because that was kind of a fun picture.
I thought so.
There it was. Yes. So if you look closely, you can kind of see the edges of it. And we did the artwork back and forth, and he said, okay, I got it ready. And I left it with him while I went to yoga. And when I came back, he had it stuck on. And this is actually my second Jeep Patriot in this exact color, because this lease was only good for 3 years. And my lease just came up. And I had to do this back in May. And he did a couple little tweaks to this artwork, but this peeled off like a sticker. And his recommendation to me was make sure it's out in the nice sun to beat on it, because it makes it softer and it comes right off. And it didn't mess the paint up or discolor the paint or anything. You couldn't even, once I washed it, you couldn't even tell I had that on there.
Right. Yes. Okay, I want to close this out here with a group of questions around fees, around your fees, your consulting fee, going rate for nutrition counseling, and I'm grouping this together, the amount of time that you in general work with a client. And does it range depending on the type of concerns that they come in with?
That's a really good question. So currently, I did not start out at this rate. Currently, I charge $120 per hour, and I charge by the quarter hour. And this is something kind of interesting. I used to just charge a flat rate for that initial consult, which is a 2-hour appointment. And I'd have people, honest to goodness, answer their phone in the middle of that appointment. And I'd be like, once I went to where I was charging by the quarter hour, that took care of itself. Yep. When people know they're on that time, and I have some people, we can be done in an hour and a half. It just depends on how extensive what they've got going on, takes time. But what I do, let's say that initial consult was $240. Okay, so we kind of got that. Within a week of that appointment, I will put together a protocol. So that's probably another 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, sometimes even more, depending on how extensive it is, to put that protocol together. And then I highly encourage them, after they get that protocol, to schedule a 30-minute appointment with me, just to kind of chew that over a little bit. And I find that my clients that do that are much more successful with those transitional steps than somebody who only receives that protocol from me. typically with that protocol, I've got to do things for them, right? We've got actions for them to do, whether it be diet changes, and it's oftentimes a diet, supportive supplements, and lifestyle changes. And I kind of give all that to them. That document, by the way, it can be 8 to 11 pages. And some of that is, pre-canned stuff that you pick and choose. But they have a lot of to do with that. And I typically will meet up in 6 to 6 weeks, if we're needing labs right away, or maybe it'll be 3 months, because maybe they already had a bunch of labs, and I like to do things in 90 to 120 day increments, because that gives them enough time to make those changes and for us to see a change in what's going on with them. And then I like to follow up with some lab tests, future out, to see how they're progressing. And some clients only need 1 or 2 appointments with me, and other people I've been working with for a couple of years because they had lots going on. So it really is it's a personal thing, a one-on-one. And then I have some clients who've worked with me, maybe only saw me for that first appointment or 2, and then I don't see them for a couple of years, and then they've come back to me to follow up working, and they were like, that was so much information, and I did some of it, but I just wasn't 100% confident of everything you were saying. I've gone out and I've seen these other practitioners, and I come to realize that you were exactly right in the beginning. And I've had that happen lots of times too. So I hope I answered all the questions.
Yeah, you did. I think it can be challenging, the amount of information we give a client initially. And giving somebody an 8 to 11 page protocol is daunting for them. I mean, they're sick. They came for support. So while I appreciate that, I would think that, letting somebody be informed what the overall scope of your intention for your protocol is to build in forward sessions with them, so that it's like, okay, here's the overall plan, but here's where we're going to start. And we're going to start here for the and the average time I think we'll need for this first phase is 2 months or 6 months or whatever you think. And so they're breaking it down, their action steps, into segments that they can work on. And once we accomplish this, then we'll move to this. And once that's handled, then we'll bring in this. And they have a sense of the overall plan without having to manage it by themselves. You're still their leader. You still guide them through the whole process. And it has them coming back and having you really see what their progress is, maybe what their stumbling blocks are, and be able to support them and guide them along the way. Maybe you're doing that already, Marjie, but I'm saying this in just the benefit of in terms of the way that I work, and just hearing what your structure is from a client's perspective. I think that in general they need more hand-holding.
Yeah, and I think you have a lot of wisdom with that, Paula. I'm not arguing with that. I just that was just kind of how it came about. And a part of that, do you know who Reed Davis is?
Sure.
A part of that, I used the Dress for Success from him, and a part of that has to do with that. And really, the first 3 to 4 pages of that document has to do with the recommendations I'm making, and the other parts are additional supportive information. Like dealing with a healing crisis, that kind of stuff, and kind of for your information. But I do hear what you're saying. I think more hand-holding is good. Unfortunately, if people feel that you're just, this is what I found, if people feel that you're just out for appointment time, then they tend to stray away from me.
Sure.
So sure. I don't know where that happy medium is, but I do appreciate your wisdom. I think that's wise.
Yeah. Perhaps it's about assessing each individual client and the level of support, and bringing them into it too. It's like, this is a complex protocol. You're pretty sick. What kind of support can I lend you for this? Because and work out a program, something like that. Anyway, Marjie, this has been a fabulous presentation. I really appreciate the time and energy that you've put into all the information that you're sharing here. I'm thrilled for your successes, and I hope that you'll continue to come back and keep us informed of the progress that you're making, and how many more employees that you have, and how many of them are hired from Hawthorn, and all those good things, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, keep coming back, Marjie. It's always good to talk with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so proud of you and all your accomplishments here. All right, everybody, thanks for staying long. I think it sure was worth it. And please be informed and help me spread the word about our next All About Alumni when we meet back here again on Wednesday, September 5th. And we'll have Melissa Peters with us, who's a graduate from our doctoral program. So that'll be exciting to hear from one of our doctors. But until then, I wish you all the best of health, and I hope that you take good care. Bye for now.